Wow, that was some awesome music to begin the new year. Great way to begin worshiping God. And I want to say Happy New Year to you. First Sunday of a new year, kind of exciting. And I realize that some of you must have made a resolution to be on time this year for worship. 6 of you. So thank you for that. I couldn't hold back from that. Actually, it wouldn't be a bad idea to do that. Think about that. Get here a little early. Prepare yourself. If you want to come really early, 9 o'clock, we have a prayer time. Prepare the way. But it's great to come and gather to worship together this morning as we begin a new series, as we begin a new year. Now, one of the things I do love about the new year, and I talked a little bit about this last week, is the optimism that we have when a new year starts. There's a lot of parties last weekend. How many of you went to a party? All right? Not many. Okay. All right. I was at Walmart New Year's Eve. I saw some of the teens from our church kind of getting their stuff ready for their party. I had a pretty wild night. My wife Jane had to work, and it was me and my 2 dogs. It was crazy. We got the party stuff, and we had a great time. But I love the optimism. What a cold night in Times Square. Millions of people gathering to celebrate a new year, and we have this anticipation. And the interesting thing is we don't know whether it's going to be a good year or a bad year or what's going to happen, but we have this optimism, and I believe that comes from being created in the image of God, that we have this innate desire to dream and to hope. And we did a series called Dreams a couple series ago, and we have this ability to create new realities. Other species can't do that, but we can because we've been created in the image of God. So we have this sense of hope. And so the new year is a natural time to reset, to rethink about our lives and to evaluate our lives. And some people make resolutions, and maybe not as many people as used to, but people make resolutions, and resolutions are typically related to a better version of me, right? A better version of you, a slimmer me, a healthier me, eating healthier, less cholesterol me, those kind of things. We think about it in terms of self-improvement, how I can be a better me. And one of the things, we think about during this time is also, how can I be better, in my relationship with God? And what we're going to be talking about in this series is thinking beyond just being a better me. We know it's a great time a year for vitamin shops, right? Health clubs tend to be crowded this time of year. Manufacturers of storage bins love this time of year. When you go into any store right now, I kind of ran to a couple stores this weekend, and what's at the front? Vitamins, health stuff, storage bins, right? And then I went into one store yesterday, and it was Valentine's stuff. So in case you didn't get the right gift for the person that's special to you, you can kind of make up for it. Valentine's. I don't know if you noticed this, but in our consumer culture, we kind of have a liturgical calendar. We really do, particularly, it's highlighted this time of year. You have Thanksgiving, but not very long anymore, a few hours, and then the stores are open, and and if they weren't open, we'd be shopping online, trying to get those good deals. Then Christmas comes, we buy all kinds of stuff for Christmas to celebrate a Savior who came and emptied himself of everything, and that makes perfect sense, for us to do that. And then we have to have storage bins, kind of store all the stuff that we've got, and to organize it. So we kind of do have a liturgical calendar in our consumer culture. So again, it's a time of year when we think about our lives and kind of where we're headed and what we're doing, and it is a good time to step back and think about where are we headed in our relationship with God? How have we grown in love for one another, for God and for others? How have we grown in generosity? It's a good time to evaluate and to dream about the future, and maybe to ask God the question, God, if you would do anything in my life in 2018, this is what I'd like you to do. So what we did last week, actually, if you weren't here last week, we had these walls on the sides of the room, and we invited people to write on those walls their dreams for 2018, or to answer the question, God, if you were to ask God, if you could ask God for anything you want in the year 2018, what would you ask Him for? And what we're going to do is we're going to have a 12-hour prayer time of prayer after the series is over, and we're going to pray over some of these things we dreamed about, or some of the things that you would say, man, if I could ask God for anything, this is what I'd ask you for. So I want to encourage you to write something down. We don't want your names or anything like that. There's some markers, so after the service you can linger. We'd love to have more things, written on the sheets. Again, so it's a good time to review our relationship with God. And as I said last week, I think one of the best gifts that you could give to God over the month of January is to block out a couple hours and just spend some time in reflection. We have a number of tools out in the atrium that can help you, can be a guide to you. Maybe you want to focus on your marriage relationship, maybe you want to focus on parenting, maybe you want to just focus on your life and your dreams. There's a lot of resources out there that we've created in different series we've done. I think they could be pretty helpful. But I want to encourage you to think about that, carving out an hour, a couple hours of time, just kind of giving it to God, looking out over your life, and allowing God to kind of look at it with you and to guide you as you look into the future. So as we begin the new year, a lot of people think about resolutions, making resolutions. Again, that's about making a better me, a different version of me. And what I want us to think about as we go throughout this series is a different question. And so the series is titled Resolution, not Resolution. To think about a different question that I think is a better question. I think it's a bigger question. I think it's a broader question. And I'll get to that question in just a moment. But I want to share with you something that I think is an inspiring video for a moment. And I'll give you some background on this video. And one of the things I think related to New Year's, how this ties in. Sometimes we go into a new year, maybe we've been through a tough season, things have been gone so well, and maybe we feel like we're even lucky, to a certain extent. And it's almost like as we look into 2018, we can't imagine it being any different, things turning around for us. And one of the great things about the gospel of Jesus Christ is that God can change and transform things. Things can turn around. Now, this isn't a video about that. But let me give you some background on this. I'm going to show you a video. I mean, some of you know that I'm from Buffalo, New York, or from that area. That's kind of where I originally grew up, outside of Buffalo, in between Buffalo and Niagara Falls. And the Buffalo Bills are kind of like the thing there in football. Now, if you think in Minneapolis, the Vikings are like a cult following. You go to a smaller town like Buffalo, you amp it up like 5 times, and that's all they have, right? So, and so it's a big deal. And as I was growing up, the Bills weren't that good, but they went through a series of time when they made the Super Bowl 4 straight times. You know how almost impossible that is to make the Super Bowl 4 straight times? They did, 4 straight times, but even more impossible, they lost 4 straight times. And so that kind of put a damper, on the team, and they went through the dark ages of the Buffalo Bills. And for 17 years, they never made the playoffs. They always found a way to lose. Even if they had an opportunity again, they'd find a way to lose at the end of the game. So they went into this last weekend having still a chance to get into the playoffs. They had a chance, not a good chance, about a 12% chance by statistics. But if they won their game and the Cincinnati Bengals beat the Baltimore Ravens, they would be in. And so actually the afternoon started out really good. They were way ahead in their game. But as true to the Buffalo Bills, the other team almost came back and won at the end, but they did hold them off. And so the Bills did their part. And now we go to the Cincinnati game against the Baltimore Ravens. And Cincinnati was way ahead. Now, unfortunately, Buffalo's luck depended on a team that's even been unluckier. So it's dependent on them. And so the Bengals were way ahead. Everything looked good. It looks like the Bills were kind of going to the playoffs. And then, true to form, last minute, the Baltimore comes back. They score a touchdown to go ahead. And it's like normal. It's going to be 18 years now. And something happened at the end of the game with 3 minutes left. The Bengals had the ball thrown 10-yard line. They're driving, but not very good. It's 4th and 12 at the 49-yard line. 4th and 12. And so this is a video of the Bills' locker room. It's 4th and 12. Now, if you know anything about football, you might not. 4th and 12 is death sentence. You're done. It doesn't happen. You don't convert that very much, certainly not the 49-yard line, and with 52 seconds left. And actually, I've seen one video of this where people are putting on their coats. It's over. They're going home. So here's the video of the locker room. It's pretty funny. this kind of a change of pace. The one guy's crying. He's been there forever, and he has his 2 little kids with him. And here's a cool part of that story. This is like, again, this kind of shows you the craziness of football, particularly in Buffalo culture. Andy Dalton's the quarterback of the Bengals who threw that touchdown pass. And he became the favorite quarterback in Buffalo, New York. And in fact, what happened is he has a foundation, and the Bills fans so desperate to make the playoffs, and they probably won't survive the first week, but so desperate to make the playoffs, about 10,000 Buffalo Bills fans donated $17 to his foundation, and in 24 hours, $170,000 was given to the Andy Dalton Foundation to help with kids with special needs from Buffalo. So it's just some fun stuff, kind of a good story, kind of a really positive story from athletics. But again, a reminder that it doesn't always have to be the way it is. So we're talking in this series about resolution, asking a different question than resolutions that ask the question, how I can be a better me. Now in this series, we're going to be looking at an Old Testament book called Nehemiah. Nehemiah is one of the historical books of the Old Testament, and probably a book that isn't read as much as some of the core books, but is a phenomenal study in leadership. And in fact, one of the messages I'm going to be giving in 3 weeks in is a message on transforming leadership, or leadership that changes. Again, it's a phenomenal story about leadership, about vision, about transformation. Now the task at hand, to kind of give you some background, I'll give you some dates too, to give you some feel of when this happened in history. The task at hand is rebuilding the wall of Jerusalem. That's basically what the whole book of Nehemiah is about. Nehemiah is an extraordinary leader. He's not mentioned in the New Testament, but he's probably one of the most exceptional leaders in all of Scripture. And what is a couple things that are amazing about the story of Nehemiah is that there are no miracles in the book. No miracles. It's all about leadership, it's about vision, it's about hard work, and an extraordinary accomplishment. And so there's no miracles. The angels don't come down and build the wall. The people of Jerusalem, the people of Israel are mobilized to build the wall. So Nehemiah basically is journaling his story of what took place. And again, he's really never mentioned in the New Testament. So we're going to, in a moment, look at chapter 1, and then I'm going to ask you that question, the question that's better than how can I be a better me? And let me give you some facts, historical facts about Nehemiah. First of all, he was cupbearer to the Persian king, Xerxes. The book of Nehemiah opens in the Persian city of Susa in the year 444 BC. So it kind of gives you, it's about 2,500 years ago, roughly. Now what had happened in the nation of Israel, at one point the nation of Israel was broken up into 2 kingdoms, the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. The northern kingdom was destroyed in the 600s BC, but the southern kingdom, where Jerusalem was taken over and destroyed by Babylonia in 586 BC. So they destroyed the temple, they destroyed the walls, the city was broken down. Many of the leaders, some of the top people from Jewish culture were carted off into exile into Babylon. So basically, Israel's out of business. A country has come in and conquered them, and they're out of business. Can you imagine what that would be like? Can you imagine packing your bags, and you probably couldn't take too much with you, I doubt you could, and you're in exile in another country, uprooted from your homeland. Of course, we know that there's a lot of modern day stories about that either through civil war or persecution, that people are being exiled today. So that's what happened in the nation of Israel. Now, in 539, Babylonia falls to the Medes and the Persians. And so the ruler of the Persian government, the king, issues a proclamation that all the Jews can go home, that they're allowed to go home. Now, a lot of them didn't, because some of them had found a pretty good life. In this other country, they had done pretty well. A lot of them didn't go back. Some went back, and there were kind of 3 different waves of people that went back. That's Zerubbabel, first in 536 BC, and at first it didn't go that well. Again, a lot of the core leadership was gone. Other people had moved into the area. They weren't exactly throwing a welcome back exiles party. They had taken over. They didn't necessarily want them to come back, so it wasn't going that well. Ezra, he comes into play, led the second wave of people back in 455 BC, and then Nehemiah in 444 BC is where we pick up his story. Now, what's interesting about the nation of Israel, when people went back, the temple was rebuilt in 516 BC, but here 7 years later, the walls of Jerusalem have not yet been rebuilt. So that's the problem. So we're going to read the entire first chapter. It's only 14 verses, I think, 14. And we're going to look at that today. And one of the things I would encourage you is one of the hopes that I always have as we look at different passages of Scripture, that it will motivate you to say, hey man, I want to open up that myself. I want to read the book of Nehemiah. Again, it's an incredible study. So let's look at this. Now in the months of Chislev, in the 20th year, while I was in the king's house in Susa, Hananiah, one of my brothers, and some men from Judah came. And I asked them about the Jews who were still living and had gotten away from Babylon and about Jerusalem. And they said to me, the Jews who are alive to have returned to the land from Babylon are in much trouble and shame. The wall of Jerusalem is broken down, and its gates are destroyed by fire. And when I heard this, I sat down and cried, and was filled with sorrow for days. Did not eat, and I prayed to the God of heaven. And that's pretty amazing. He's moved, he's broken, right? He weeps for days, fasts, doesn't eat for days. And I said, O Lord God of heaven, the great God who is honored with fear, who keeps the agreement and loving kindness for those who love him and keep his laws, listen to me and let your eyes be open. Hear the prayer of your servant, which I now pray to you day and night for the sons of Israel, your servants, telling the sins of the sons of Israel which we have sinned against you. I and my father's house have sinned. We have sinned in our action against you. We have not kept the laws which you gave to your servant Moses. So in a sense, Nehemiah is confessing for the people. Remember what you told your servant Moses, saying, if you are not faithful, I will make you go different places in other nations. But if you return to me and keep my laws and obey them, I will gather you and bring you to the place where I have chosen for my name to be. I will do this even if you have been spread out to the farthest part of heavens. They are your servants and your people whom you have made free by your great power and strong hand. O Lord, hear the prayer of your servant and the prayer of your servants who are happy to fear your name. Make your servant do well today and give him loving pity in front of this man. So he's going to go talk to the king of Persia, Xerxes. A powerful passage of the Scripture. So let's talk a little bit more about Nehemiah. He was cupbearer to the king. Now, we might think in our culture, wow, that's kind of like a low-level assignment, being a cupbearer to the king, but actually it was a position of incredible influence. You would only get that job if you were really trusted. And so you would, at some times, you would have to drink something before the king drank it, or eat something before the king ate it, to make sure that there was no poison. Now, I often do this at our family gatherings. And someone has to do it. How often, when Jane has made a big dinner, a wonderful dinner, I'll volunteer to be the cupbearer. And, somebody has to do the job, making sure that the rest of the family isn't poisoned. But that was his job. It wasn't, he would have been close to the king, had a lot of interaction with the king. It was a position of great influence. Now, the wall. Let's talk about the wall for a minute. Now, in antiquity, this is how it worked. You had to have walls to protect the city. And so, if your army was going to have a position of defense, there had to be walls built around the city. So what is happening here for the nation of Israel, they rebuilt the temple, but because the walls haven't been built, they are extremely vulnerable any day to another country, another army coming in and taking them over and conquering them. So, they're virtually defenseless. They're vulnerable, in this situation. And one of the approaches that Nehemiah takes in this book is that he reminds God that God has promised certain things. That God has promised that if they return to him, if they follow him, that God will bring them back together. It reminds me of the promise in Jeremiah, where through Jeremiah, God says, you will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart. And so Nehemiah, he confesses the sins of the people. He admits, hey, we've not been good. But he comes back and reminds God of his promises. And so the last week of this series, Pastor Maddie is going to bring a message related to the promises of God. What are the promises of God that we can bank on in 2018? And 2 or 3 times, actually, Nehemiah reverts to the promises of God. And then he asks, give your servant success and grant him favor in the presence of this man. So he has daily contact with the king, with his position, and now he's going to go ask the most powerful man in the world at this time if he would help him out to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. And at that point in time, approaching the king was a dangerous thing. If the king didn't call you, if you approached the king on your own, you could be executed, you could be put to death. But he asked God for favor to approach the king, because basically he's going to tell him that, I'm starting a GoFundMe thing to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem, and I want you to be the primary, actually the only one. I want you to grant me a leave of absence, and I want you to fund the whole project to make it happen. And so he eventually goes to the king. Now here's a couple things that are amazing about this, we could easily miss in reading this through quickly, is that Nehemiah's breakdown moment comes 140 years after the original event of the walls being broken down, the city of Jerusalem being destroyed. So he has this passionate, emotional moment about something that took place 140 years ago, which has continuing consequences for the nation of Jerusalem. So that'd be like you and I being reminded of something that happened, like 140 years ago, just kind of after the Civil War, and kind of having this broken down moment where we're caught in tears and we're praying and fasting, for a few days. Now here's another interesting thing. We don't know really the answer to this question, I don't think for sure, but it's probably likely, again, this is amazing to me, that he had this broken moment. It's probably likely that he had never been to Jerusalem. He was born in captivity. He was born, in exile. So he has this passionate, desire to bring help and restoration to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. He's probably never been there. Maybe he saw some pictures online or something like that. I don't know, but he's probably never been there. Probably, never seen it. And God gives him, this passion. And so here's the question, better than the question, how do I make a better me, or how do I make resolutions? And again, I think it's a better question, a bigger question, a broader question for this new year is this. What breaks your heart? What breaks your heart? As you look around our greater community, as you look around our country, as you look around our world, what breaks your heart? Now you might think to yourself, I try not to think about that too much. It's just too emotional for me, it takes up too much energy, it's kind of better to hide from that. But again, the question is, what breaks your heart? What breaks my heart? What breaks our heart? So instead of going into this year thinking, what should I do about me? Maybe a better question is, what do I need to do about the world around me? Instead of, what do I do about me? How do I fix me? How to make a better version of me? How do I do something to bring transformation to the world around me? Change begins with a broken heart. That's the title of the message today. Change begins with a broken heart. Particularly change that's initiated by God. It begins with a broken heart. Now when you think about it, the people you admire the most, the people who we would say are heroes, and I'm not talking about people who are just successful or have a lot of money that are popular, that sometimes we would think are, we really like them, or a lot of young people want to model their lives after people who are rich and successful. I'm not talking about that, but people who are true heroes, probably it's not because they were able to maintain their ideal body weight their entire life, and it's probably not that. Now that's a good thing, right? And having bad habits in our lives can get in the way of us fulfilling, the dreams that God's placed on us. But that's not why. It's usually because people have sacrificially given themselves to make a difference over something that broke their heart or something that breaks the heart of God. And we all have potential, every one of us, to change our slice, our piece of the world, our sphere of influence. We all have the potential to make a difference. Throughout the history of the Christian church, motivated by love for God and love for others, Christians have built, shelters for the homeless, orphanages, for orphans, created hospitals where there were no hospitals, worked in a powerful way to bring compassionate ministries and needs to people throughout the world. In fact, the early church gained respect because when there were times of crisis, particularly disease, they didn't run away. But they stayed and they cared not only for their own, but they cared for others. And that was just astonishing, to other people that they would do that. Now, one of the things that is true about our country, and now we live in a day and age where it's almost not politically correct to be a little patriotic or to be kind of proud of your country. And one of the things that's interesting about our country, and I checked the stats on this this week just to kind of make sure I was true on this, is that that one of the things that's unique about our country is in terms of generosity. That there's probably never been a country in the world that has been more generous in giving and serving, volunteer service, but also in meeting the needs of crisis, across the world. Probably never been a country that's been more generous. Certainly has not been a country that's sent more Christian missionaries to proclaim the good news of Jesus. But also, when missionaries go, they tend to bring compassionate ministries along with them. And in fact, one of the reasons that we send our Walk for Water money through Nazarene Compassionate Ministries is there's already missionaries there. We don't have to create a new network, and so all the money can go towards making a difference and helping provide clean water for people. And I believe that is, I know we have all kinds of issues and problems, and we're not perfect and that kind of thing, but I believe the reason that is because of our Judeo-Christian heritage and foundation, as a country. When Thomas Jefferson was creating the first drafts of the Declaration of Independence, he wrote this, and it became part of our Declaration of Independence, that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Now, a couple hundred years later or more than that, we kind of take that for granted. Well, of course, obvious, right? Well, it wasn't so obvious then. And in fact, that's not typically how countries ran. Most countries ran by who had more power, who had more influence, who had more money. That was the measure of your value. And I know we don't have it perfect. And I know we have some challenges with that. But sometimes it breaks my heart that we can't cherish the good. And the reason this kind of came to mind for me is that I had the opportunity to go to a Veterans Day celebration. And it was at Andover High School. My son, who had graduated from West Point, had the opportunity to speak at that. It was just kind of cool. It was kind of refreshing. It was okay to be patriotic for an hour, for a day. And I think, sometimes we forget that we've been part of this really unique experiment that has created generosity. Again, we have a lot of problems. That's not saying we don't. It has created generosity, but it has flowed from our Judeo-Christian foundation in the heart of God to make a difference in the lives of other people. And one of the things I'll probably do throughout this series, I think I'm going to do it each of the weeks that I speak, is talk about something maybe specific that breaks my heart that I think that we can do something about or are already doing something about, to a certain extent. And I would say one of the things that, kind of a broad theme, of things that break my heart that kind of all fit under this is the false perceptions of our culture. The lies that we're constantly, told to believe. It might be lies related to what is the value of our life, but I think there's a lot of lies and false perception in our culture that push people in the wrong direction to places that are not really good for them. And so almost everything that really bugs me, or everything that I would say breaks my heart, that I have moments when I'm writing in my prayer journal that causes me to come to tears or anguish, are related to false perceptions about us, about who we are, or about God and who He is, or about what it means to follow Jesus. And one of those, I'll just start with about us this week. Next week I'm going to talk about false perceptions related to God because it fits more with the title of the message next week. But the first one is this, is about us, and here's the thing that breaks my heart. And I think I've always kind of understood this to a certain extent, but probably 8-9 years ago when I started my doctoral program in strengths-based leadership, I saw it more acutely. But it's this. It's when people like you, me, and others, it could be adults, it could be kids, do not understand their unique beauty and makeup. When somehow the messages of our world have communicated to people that they're worthless, that they don't have value, and they can't possibly make a difference. You see, I think that everybody should have a moment in their life where they get it. That, like, wow, it's pretty cool how God put me together. This is why I love what I love, and this is where I can make a dramatic difference. And I'm not talking about in an arrogant way. I'm just talking about in humility. Wow. The way God put me together is so amazing. And I want to use these gifts and talents and things that God has entrusted me to make a difference. You know, one of the things that I've created over the last few years, talk sheets. Some of you are familiar with those. If you're new here, you wouldn't be. Things to have discussions at your dinner table and those kind of things. And the reason that I developed those is not to be annoying, and I'm sure some of you think that it's annoying, but it's because we have so few moments in our culture where we really talk to one another about who we are. And if we're willing to take risks and to have deeper conversations, we can speak life into each other. We can say things about who we really are, who we are coming to be. And it can be life-changing. Actually, there's no greater gift. There's nothing you can buy that can replace someone speaking words into your life that describe who you are and your value. So one of the things that, again, it just breaks my heart to see so many people struggle with questions like, what are a couple words, positive words that you would say about you or someone else would say, or, what are you good at? People struggling, with those kind of things. And I think part of the enemy's tactics, and I've talked about that recently in one of the messages, is that when we don't see that, we never fully realize our potential to bring positive transformation to the world, to take care of those things that God places in our heart that we're broken about. That in a sense we live our lives kind of not fully alive. We're kind of, and I think there's a lot about our culture, again, that kind of creates more deadened existence, and that God wants us to be fully alive. Now as a church, we're doing quite a bit about that, and it's kind of tied into our passion to help people thrive in life and their relationship with God. That is our passion. And again, I think, it grieves God. I think it makes God sad when we don't see the good and how He's put us together. And so it's one of the things that breaks my heart, and I know it breaks many of yours. And when we think of Nehemiah, there's a lot that happened because he fulfilled that burden that God put on his heart. And probably most of us don't realize what could potentially hang in the balance to embrace the burden that God has placed on our heart. We don't understand what hangs in the balance. We can just kind of see through this narrow lens. But Nehemiah's broken heart was by divine design. He didn't know that when God was stirring in his heart, what was going to eventually happen and the progression of events. So God stirred Zerubbabel, 90 years before Nehemiah, to take that first wave of people back. And then 10 years before Nehemiah, Ezra takes a group of people back. He's a teacher of the law. And then Nehemiah, feels called of God, and he goes back and he leads the people to rebuild the wall of Jerusalem. Now, here's the miracle of the story. We'll talk a little bit more about this in future messages, but the wall had not been built in 70 years. Through Nehemiah and his leadership, it was built in 52 days. They got it done. And again, there are no miracles, through the work of people. And what Nehemiah couldn't have imagined as part of this progression is that 470 years later, Jesus would walk into the city of Jerusalem inside those walls. He would stand up in the synagogue and he'd read from the prophet Isaiah, the words, "I've come, I'm anointed by God, proclaim release to the captives, to set the prisoners free." And Jesus would sit down at the close of that in the city of Jerusalem, in the walls of Jerusalem. And he said, "On this day, these words are fulfilled in me." So his act of obedience, following God's call, led to a moment 470 years later when the Son of God would march into the city, walk into the city, and proclaim his kingdom had come. You know, often we don't understand how one simple yes can change destiny. I know a long time ago, Jay and I felt called to come here and launch this church, and there's probably a number of times we've thought to ourselves, what if we hadn't done it? A lot of people's lives have been turned upside down, and hopefully mostly in a good way, and the impact of DNA has spread to other places, and what if we had not responded? And for all of us, as we think of what God placed in our heart, what if we had not done what God called us to do? What would have been left undone? Now, don't get me wrong. If you need to lose weight, I think you should lose weight. If you need to get out of debt, you definitely should get out of debt. If there's an addiction in your life, you need to be broken free from that, because those things that hold us in bondage, I want to make light of that, can prevent us from fulfilling God's call on the things that break our heart. But our life really is more than a body, it's more than a balance sheet. So what breaks your heart? And would you be open over, this month to just say, God, I'm open to you speaking to me. I want to be reminded. Maybe you already know, maybe you've been working on it, many of you probably have. But just, God, I want you to be open. And for us, as a community, God, what breaks your heart? What can we do about it to make a difference? Maybe maybe it scares you to think about it a little bit. You're not sure what God would ask you to do, and what He might call you to sacrifice or to give up. And we'll talk about that a little bit next week. That if you're going to fulfill the call of God, and Nehemiah had to make a big change in his life. It's going to cost you as a piece of your life, to do that. So our prayer this morning is, the question is, what breaks your heart? Our prayer is, God, I just want to give you permission to break my heart, to speak to me, to draw close to me, and show me how you created me and wired me, how you created us and wired us as a community to make a difference for your kingdom. Let's pray together. Dear God, we thank you for the opportunity to worship you this morning. Thank you for the music and how powerful that is in helping us understand the truths of your word and the promises. And God, to just long for your presence to be at work within us. And God, we just want to today give you permission to speak to us. And as we come and gather this morning, whether we're followers of Christ or not, we understand the principle that our hearts can be broken over things that are troubling. And in that brokenness, we can step forward and we can make a move and take steps of faith that can make a difference. All of our lives have been affected in some way, shape, or form. Again, whether we're following or not, by someone who was broken by something, and they step forward to make a difference. So God, we want to be those people in this day and age. We want to honor you. And so God, we just pray that you would speak to us throughout this month, throughout this day, even as we sing this final song. In the name of Jesus we pray. Amen. Let's stand together as we worship.